Hey guys, welcome back. So, as I mentioned in the last video, today's video is going to be about priming and painting the pop. Now, bear in mind, if you are going to want to do a bit of clay work and sculpting on your pop, then this process will come after that. So you do your sculpting, you dry your clay, and then you'd get it ready for painting. But there's no difference in painting a pop that's got sculpting on it to painting a pop that hasn't. So I thought I'd just do a generic painting video first. Now, before you get started, what you're going to need is your primer, your spray primer. Only if you've got an outside space. If you haven't got an outside space, I mentioned in my first video, you can use this Imperial primer. Now that's just a very liquidy primer, so you can mix it with like a black paint, black base paint, and you can just paint it on. But if you've got an outside space, then you can use the spray on primer. Then you're going to want your gloves to protect your hands. If you can get a mask so you're not breathing the fumes in. Then you're going to want of course, your pop part, what you're spraying, and then after that you're going to want your brushes, your paints, and you're going to also want a palette. Like I also mentioned in my first video, I just use little Ferrero Rocher tubs to put my paint in and then mix it in there. And then you're going to want a little tub for your water in that, so you can water your paints down correct. So once you've got all that ready, you can just head out and get painting.
Right, so before you prime your pops, make sure to give them a wash with some soapy water to remove all the factory oils. This will help the primer adhere to the vinyl better and prevent any blotches. Next up, get your pop part ready and give your can of spray paint a good shake for around 2 minutes. And then you're ready to start painting. You're going to want to spray in short, smooth swipes to avoid the paint running. I'm using the matte white army painter here. I mentioned in my first video how it's my go-to white primer, and you can see how good the coverage is. You're also going to want to use something as backing to catch the off spray from the primer. Here I've just used a shoe box, but you may also want to put a sheet down to protect the surface you're spraying on. It's also useful to put the pop heads on sticks so that you can turn them 360 degrees without having to touch them and smear the primer. And once you're satisfied that you've covered the entire pop, set it aside to dry. And it's the same story for the body. Grip it by the neck plug and again spray in short, smooth motions. As the body is a lot smaller, you'll get full coverage a lot faster. You don't need to absolutely drench it, a light coat should do fine. And again, once you're done, just set the part aside to dry. Next, I'll demonstrate the Rust-Oleum plastic primer. As I mentioned in my first video, I picked this up as a substitute when both the Army Painter and Citadel White primers were out of stock. It does a decent job as a backup, but as you can see, it doesn't provide the same level of coverage per spray as the Army Painter. Okay, so once your primer's dried, you're ready to start painting. Give your paint pot a good shake, then, using a damp brush, scoop some paint out of the tub into your palette and mix in a little bit of water for better consistency. Dry off another damp brush and you can start applying the paint. Holding the brush as you'd hold a pen, apply the paint with broad brush strokes. Here the consistency of the paint is a little bit more watery than I prefer. You can rectify this by taking a bit of moisture from your brush, or adding a touch more paint to the mix. Painting with watery paint isn't as bad as painting with thick paint, it just means you'll need a lot more layers to get the desired coverage. If you're unsure about how watery or thick your paint is, then here is a good and easy test. Give your paint tub a shake again, and just like before, using a damp brush, scoop out some paint into your palette. If you're struggling to get enough paint from the lip on the lid, then you can just dip into the tub. Now to check the paint, dry off a damp brush, dip it in the paint and in one stroke paint a line on a piece of paper. If you don't get a nice continuous line, this means that your paint is too thick. To remedy this, just add a touch more water to your paint. You'll see how much smoother and unbroken the line is, and this should be a good thickness to paint with. So when it comes to painting larger areas, just moisten and dry off a broad brush, dip it into the paint and apply it in smooth, broad brush strokes. You can see here how much more improved the coverage is compared to the more watery grey paint I used on the body. For finer details, like the spikes on the fringe here, just get a finer brush and apply the paint in shorter, more controlled brush strokes. For the finer points at the very end of the hair, I'd usually use a finer brush than the one I'm using here. If you're struggling to keep a steady hand, then a good technique is to plant both your elbows onto your work surface and press the bottom of your palms together, like so. Alternatively, another good method is to tuck your elbows tight into your body. After you have painted your pop and the paint is dry, you can varnish or seal it. This helps to protect the paint from getting scratched or chipped. You can just apply it lightly, you really don't need all that much for it to do the trick.
Right, so I hope that was informative. If you want to know more about the parts I use, the paints and the primer, etc., then check out my first video. In that video, I'll go through what brands I always use and then where you can possibly pick them up from, so that should be helpful to you. Going forward, I'm looking at doing a sculpting video next, so I'll just be showing you like the feel of the clay and then how to bake it. And I'll also be doing some pop reviews coming up as well. Right, so thanks for watching again, guys. Like I say, I hope it helped. Please like, share and subscribe if you found it helpful. And also, if you want to look at some of my custom work, I've put a link to my Facebook and Instagram in the video description below, as always. So yes, stay safe, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Okay, see ya.